Yo, what is up, everybody? Popo here, bringing guys a new video, and today we're going to be ranking all the Regulation G restricteds. Let's go. Welcome, everybody. And Regulation G was just announced yesterday, and it is what I said it was going to be, and that is the one restricted format. So we're going to be able to throw one of these Pokemon into our team and have a good time. This is going to change the meta quite a bit, actually, because there's a lot of really good Pokemon in here that will just replace other Pokemon that are already in the meta, maybe playing a similar role. We'll get to that when we get to the Pokemon. But I just want to go through. I'm going to kind of rank these. We're going to tier them. I mixed them up down there, so they're kind of in a random order rather than just being in like a bad order. I just didn't like the way it was ordered, so I kind of mixed them up and moved them around. And we're just gonna go through them, talk about them, and we're gonna see what's the best of the best. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Our first Pokemon here, of course, is we got Rayquaza. So Rayquaza plays a very similar role to what Dragonite does, but it takes a restricted spot. It is a stronger Pokemon and also gets rid of the weather, but taking that restricted spot from a Pokemon that's already doing something successfully could be a detriment to it. I'm going to say it's a C. I think there's a chance that it could be good. Of course, it does have Dragon Ascent, which is a really strong move with Terra flying. It could do massive amounts of damage with Choice Band, and you know, you could even go Choice Scarf if you really wanted to. He has some decent moves, but overall I just think he is mid, and I think getting rid of your restricted spot to have a Pokemon that already does something that another Pokemon already does just doesn't really make sense to me. So I think he's going to be mid tier. I think we'll see some teams with it. I think he'll see some success maybe on the online circuit, but going into like Worlds and a couple of the regionals and North American internationals, I don't think we're going to see much of it. Next we have Palkia Origin Form. Now, Palkia Origin Form is slightly statistically better than Palkia itself, but I think it's just worse than Palkia because you have to use your item on it, so that way you can't run the Assault Vest, you can't run the leftovers on the Palkia. So I think it's just worse than Palkia. It's yet to be seen if that's going to be true, but yeah, it has more bulk, but it's just not enough bulk, you know what I mean? Because if you throw Assault Vest on there, it's going to be way more. If you throw leftovers on there, you're going to gain those incremental life increases every turn on a bulky Pokemon, so that's going to equal more bulk than what it's going to get from having the item on it itself. Though it does raise the attack a little bit and you get the bulk, but it just doesn't do enough, you know? Next we have Dialga. I'm a big fan of Dialga. Its typing is really good. Steel and Dragon is very, very good typing. We see Hisuian Gudra, who's had success in the past. This is a special attacking Pokemon that can also set Trick Room, which is really good. I think Dialga is very good. It's shown in the past that it's been very good. It's been hit or miss, honestly, in most of the formats. But I think it's going to be pretty good, and with Terastallization, you can get rid of a lot of those weaknesses and go into something like Fairy type that'll get rid of that fighting weakness, as well as that ground weakness, and just give you that little bit more of a range. So I think Dialga is pretty good, and I think it will see some play. I don't know how successful it will be, but I definitely think it will be good. Next, we have Zamazenta non-shield form, so this is just base form. I think this Pokemon's actually good. It gets coaching, which is really, really good, and it's very fast. It's actually faster than Fluttermane, and it can one-shot Fluttermane relatively easy with like Iron Head. But more importantly, it actually now gets Iron Defense plus Body Press. So this is a really fast Body Press Pokemon that's actually really bulky. It still gets that defensive boost when it comes out, so you're going to be +1 defense to start the match, and then you can get that boost up, or you can use that boost to then increase your partner Pokemon. So it's going to play a very similar role to something like the Gouging Fire does now, though with a different typing and without having to use your item on something like that booster energy. You can use this for something more effective, maybe a berry, or you can use it on Covert Cloak, something like that. so you can't be faked out. So I think this Pokemon's going to be actually pretty good. I think people are kind of sleeping on it. It's probably going to be, it might not be a B tier in a single restricted format, because then you're using your restricted for this, but in a double restricted format, I think this Pokemon will be really, really good. So you know what? I'm going to move it down to C. Yeah, I'm going to move it down to C because it is a single restricted format. But if it was double, I would definitely put this at B, because I think it's better than people think it is. Next, we have Base Form Calyrex. This thing is terrible. Just don't use this thing. There's really no point. It doesn't do anything. Eternatus, I think, is actually... I think Eternatus is really good. It's super, super bulky. I'm going to put it high B tier. I don't think it's quite A tier, but it's super, super bulky. It has really good typing. It's just like, it does a lot. It has some pretty good moves. You know, it's a really good Pokemon. I don't know if it's going to be super successful, but it had niches in, you know, Sword and Shield. So it'll be interesting to see if without terrestrialization, if this Pokemon can now take advantage of the fact that nothing is terrestrializing and be even better, because it couldn't terrestrialize then either. Also, you now have Terra, so maybe you can Terra Poison to get extra damage off, or you can go something like Terra Flying or anything like that. Has a really good speed, special attack, and HP stat. This thing is pretty bulky, so I think it's a good Pokemon. I'm interested to see what people do with it, because I think it has a lot of use cases. Next, we have Giratina. I think Giratina is pretty bad. I love Giratina. He's one of my favorite restricted Pokemon, but I just don't think it's a good Pokemon overall. It does Will-O-Wisp. It's really bulky, but single restricted, I just don't really see it. I think people might make use of it because it can do a couple of different things. It could break, protects, and stuff like that. So maybe we might see a little bit of usage on it, but I don't really see it really impacting any of the meta. But speaking of impacting the meta, of course, we have Groudon. I think Groudon's an A tier going into this. I think it's also better in a double restricted format, whereas here it really has to do everything itself, and being weak to water types is going to be tough, especially when there's going to be a water type that can actually attack in the sun. So it's going to be really hard for Groudon to keep up with a meta like that. Though I think it's still a really good Pokemon. Its move being super inaccurate is also a really big disadvantage, and something that it has overcome in the past, but can it continue to overcome that is yet to be seen. There's a lot of support for Sun now. Of course, we got Flutter Mane and stuff like that. So that just jumps him up even further, because without Photosynthesis, he probably would be a C tier going into the single restricted format. But because of Photosynthesis, I think he is very, very good. He deals with Raging Bolt very, very well. You can throw Assault Vest on him, and now that you can terrestrialize into a water type, into a grass type. Then you can go for Grass Terra if you want to. You can go into Electric type if you really want to. There's a lot of things that he can do to take advantage of the terrestrialization. So I think Groudon will be pretty good. I don't think it's going to be the best in the format, but yeah, I think it'll see some usage, and I think it'll have some results. Ho-Oh, though, I think Ho-Oh is pretty bad. There's just way better choices, and it just kind of not doing anything. Its ability is Regenerator, I believe, and that, you know, you're going to be switching it in, switching it out, and there's a lot of things that just hit it for super effective in this meta. It can terrestrialize, but, you know, it's not really doing much even when it's terrestrialized. So I just think this Pokemon is kind of meh. Of course, Sacred Fire is really good because you get that 50% chance to burn, and it's a high attack stat, you know, a high base stat attack. So, I mean, it's good, but I don't think Ho-Oh's that great. Though Wheezy's going to try to use this thing and claim that it's the best Pokemon of all time, so respect to Wheezy. Next we have Kyogre, and of course Kyogre is one of the best restricteds of all time. It has had results time and time again, so has Groudon, respectively. But the thing and the difference here is now that Kyogre can terrestrialize, it can take advantage of a lot more situations to whereas it lost in the past. And one of the use cases for Kyogre and the way that Kyogre gets better is putting it next to something like the Farigiraf. Going slow going slow with your Kyogre could actually be a better strat than going fast in a lot of cases. Or you can just have a, you know, a mid-tier speed Kyogre. That way you can use Tailwind and Trick Room with it and be successful with both. So Kyogre is a really, really, really good Pokemon going into the single restricted. You're gonna have to have something that can deal with it, and Rillaboom's not gonna be enough because Farigiraf is out there and it's gonna be blocking all of your priority attacks. We saw Serena actually get a lot of usage back in the original single restricted format with Kyogre for that exact same reason, because the Queen's Majesty made it so that way you couldn't go for that Grassy Glide into the Kyogre, and it's going to be a very similar situation here, especially because Raging Bolt is actually really relevant too. So it's just stopping both of those, which is really, really good for Kyogre and really, really bad for stopping Kyogre. So it's going to be really cool to see how the meta can evolve and change and allow you to deal with stuff like the Kyogre. So I'm kind of excited to see what people do with Kyogre, because I think it has a lot of use going into this. All right, Kyurem Black. I think Kyurem Black is okay. I think its typing is decent. It hits a lot of the restricteds for at least neutral, if not super effective, because of that ice type. Ice type is really, really good offensively. Defensively, this Pokemon is pretty trash. Just has a lot of weaknesses and not so many resists. So it's had a little bit of success in the past. Nothing to really write home about, but I think it's going to continue to be just meh. And some people use it. You'll see it on ladder, like just people, because they like it. This is a Pokemon people like. It's really cool. It's a big dragon, buff dragon boy. So he's really cool. So I think we will see it. Next we have Duskmane. Necrozma Duskmane, I think is a B. I think it's pretty decent. It's pretty slow. So with Trick Room, it could be usable. It gets like Sword Dance and stuff like that, so it can set up. I think it's pretty good. It's possible that it's high C tier. I think it's around this range. Its ability doesn't really do too much for it, and it has decent stats though. So if you can take advantage of those and do some stuff, you know, steel moves are always going to be good, especially with Fluttermane around, though it is weak to Fluttermane as well. So you got to take those into consideration. With Terrestrialization, it could do pretty decent. I'm not really sure. It didn't really do anything in Sword and Shield, so yeah, it's yet to be seen. Next we have Kyurem White. I think Kyurem White's actually better than Kyurem Black, and I think it's actually a B tier. It has less weaknesses. First of all, second of all, it's pretty strong. I mean, it has a huge special attack. It does fire attacks, you know, it does ice attack. It has really good coverage, so you can do a lot with it, and I think that gives it a little bit of advantage. We've seen better results out of Kyurem White than we have from Kyurem Black, so that could go into that as well. So I think Kyurem White could be pretty decent. We'll see some teams that might be taking advantage of it, maybe with the Sun. You still set up Sun with Torkoal, and then this thing is getting a big boost next to your Fluttermane or something like that. So I think this Pokemon could be pretty decent. Next we have Zamazenta Shield form. I don't think this thing is that good, especially in a single restricted. Once again, it does get coaching. It is bulkier than the other form, and I think has a little bit more attack, but it just is slower and is now slower than Fluttermane, and you don't have an item essentially, so it's just not as good. I wouldn't use this Pokemon, honestly. It's probably better than Ho-Oh though, but not by much. Okay, Zacian. So Zacian in single restricted wasn't great back in the day because it couldn't Terrestrialize. It couldn't Dynamax. I apologize. It couldn't Dynamax, but now it doesn't need to worry about that. This thing is a high A tier. I don't think it's an S tier, only because it gets countered by so many things, but it can absolutely destroy Fluttermanes, so that definitely raises its stakes by quite a bit. It is still weak to something like that Incineroar, especially with that attack drop that it now has. It's base 150. as well as Intrepid Sword only working once. So if you get Intimidate off on it, it's just going to be neutral 150, which is still great, obviously. But as soon as you parting shot this thing, it's going to be stuck at that attack unless it's running Sword Dance. And if it's running Sword Dance and you know that, you can take advantage of it. It still takes a lot from a lot of attacks. If it does Terrasilize, you can take advantage of that with Fluttermane. So, or maybe some of these other restricted. So it still definitely has a place, and I think it's going to do really, really well. Has the best typing in the game, of course, with the Fairy Steel type, which is a ridiculous typing, and be able to pivot out of those typings to have a typing that gives you more advantages in certain situations is also huge for this Pokemon. So I think it's still going to be great. I just don't think it's going to be that S tier Pokemon. I think it's just under that. If it didn't get nerfed, this thing is #1 Pokemon of all time, right? But with those little bitty nerfs, I think it just kind of loses a little bit of that luster. So next we have Kyurem. Don't use this Pokemon. This is another one. Just fuse it. I mean, it's just better when it's fused. So Lugia, unfortunately, is not very good. I love Lugia. It's probably my favorite. I had some really good results with it back in Sword and Shield. I really love this Pokemon, though especially in a single restricted format is not very good because it just doesn't have the support around it. I think people will try to use it because people love Lugia. I'm going to try using it. You know, I'm going to have fun with it. But I just don't think it's really that good. It's super bulky. It has good recovery. Recover has now been nerfed as well, so you do lose a little bit of the PP. I believe it had more PP in the last game. I can't remember. Maybe it only had 5 then too, but that has gotten nerfed. So it's just going to do less. You know, its best move is inaccurate. Its typing's not super great. But with Terastallization, maybe you can take advantage of that. You can run Terra Blast flying now instead of Aeroblast. I don't know. I have to do some calcs and stuff, but yeah, he's just not very good, honestly. Next we have Calyrex Shadow, and this is probably one, if not the best Pokemon in the format. This Pokemon is actually insane. It does so much damage. Its spread move being base 120, because they did nerf it by 10 points, I believe, is still huge. And it's on a ghost, which is going to make Farigiraf even more viable because it can't be hit by this. But it also gets Expanding Force. So don't forget that this thing can do Expanding Force, Astral Barrage, Terra Blast, Fairy. This thing can do a lot of things, and it's just going to do a ton of damage next to Helping Hand. Next to your own Farigiraf, something like that. This thing could be an absolute menace. So be ready for this thing. You're going to have something that can deal with it. It's going to be tough because, once again, because of that Terastallization, it's going to be really tough to deal with this Pokemon. So it's going to be really cool to see people building around this thing and trying to stop it more than trying to use it. And Kyogre is a really good option if you can be faster, if you can get that Tailwind up, or you can get that Trick Room set up, then you have a chance. But otherwise, this thing is just going to sweep. Its ability can't be stopped by Weezing, so we could see some Weezing teams with this thing to stop the Rain or Sun from going up, from the Photosynthesis from activating, from this thing being stopped by Fluttermane, because Fluttermane does hit it 4 times effective unless it Terastallizes. But it also just destroys Fluttermane too, so, and it's faster. But if it gets that Photosynthesis, then obviously Fluttermane's faster, so that's a way to run it. It's interesting to see if maybe Regieleki will come back to help deal with this Pokemon, because Regieleki can go for, you know, those spread Electro Webs. It was a great way to deal with it back in Sword and Shield. So I'm really interested to see how this meta evolves around this Pokemon, because I think this is going to be one of the biggest Pokemon. All right, now Lunala has won the World Championship, this Pokemon, but in a single restricted, I don't think it's that good. I think in double restricted, it's actually pretty good. I'm going to put it at the top of D tier. This should actually be, I'm going to put him over Ho-Oh because I think he's better. But I don't think it's that good in single because it needs that damage from that other Pokemon. Of course, Meteor Beam is great and it allows you to do more damage, but sometimes you want to be clicking Wide Guard, or you want to be protecting, and you just can't really do that when you're by yourself. I mean, there are other damaging support Pokemon that you could be using. Urshifu Single Strike is going to be a great option next to this Pokemon, just because it hits everything that this one doesn't. So that's going to be a great, fantastic option to sit this Pokemon next to. But I just think it just doesn't have the power level to do it by itself. It needs one other Pokemon. I think when Double Restricted comes out, this Pokemon is going to rise significantly, and I think it'll be really good again. So Mewtwo. I think with Terrestrialization, Mewtwo has a chance to be okay. I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think it's ever going to be good, but it has so many coverage moves. Like, this thing gets everything, and it can do a lot of damage, honestly, and it's relatively quick. So I think it could be used, and I think people will definitely try to use it because Mewtwo. People love Mewtwo. Like, people are on that game. Like, let's go. So, respect if you try to go for the Mewtwo. I just don't think it's that great. I think it's kind of meh. Next, we have Calyrex Ice, and this is another one I'm going to throw right up in S tier because this Pokemon is gross. It can set up its own Trick Room. It can also just go for those Glacial Lances, which once again was nerfed a little bit. But that's going to do tons of damage. You can't eat berries in front of this thing. It now gets Clear Amulet, so it's not even walled by something like Incineroar. So, like, there's just so much that this Pokemon can do that it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we see a lot of these Howl strats going on right now. We could see a lot of that still going on. With Gouging Fire plus this Pokemon, right? You can go for the Howls, maybe set up the Trick Room, and start doing work that way. So, this Pokemon is going to be so good. Be scared of this Pokemon. You're going to need a counter for this, too. These three right here, your team's going to have something for it. This is going to be the roulette of death, in my opinion. So good. The base form Zacian, don't use this thing. It is terrible. Miraidon is probably top of A tier. I think it's just missing out on S tier. It does activate all of the Quark Drive Pokemon, but none of them are particularly needing it. You know, it's not like it makes those Pokemon better. I mean, you can make a case for something like the Iron Moth, because then you can get that speed boost. Maybe you can now have Focus Sash on it rather than having to have something like, you know, the booster energy. So that way you can take a hit, and then you can go for the acid sprays plus maybe the discharge, and you go Terra Ground or something like that. So you can go discharge, and then you're just doing massive amounts of damage with those two together. So, I mean, there are use cases, and I think that people will try these things, but I think they're too gimmicky, and I think that it's not as good as Sun because it doesn't give boosts to anything but those electric types. Not even those electric types, just the electric type moves. I think this being in the format may lower the usage of something like a Moongus as well. It makes Sun teams a little bit harder to use against it because you can't put to sleep. So if you're going for like a Lilligant or something, you won't be able to do that against this team either. So you'd have to have an alternative strategy if you are playing those Sun teams. So I think this Pokemon's really good. It has a huge special attack. It gets boosted by the electric terrain twice, which is really strong. Being electric type as well is decent, as you know, it only has one weakness, so you're not really losing anything there. Yeah, great Pokemon. Next we have Dialga Origin Form. I'm gonna put Dialga Origin Form next to Dialga. It makes it bulkier. Sometimes you want to run Assault Vest on Dialga, but this just gives you a bulkier Dialga that can still do the same thing. So I don't see it as bad as the Origin Form Palkia, because I think Palkia is just way better. They're about even. So I think they're both pretty decent. So next we have the what is it called? The Gale Wing. It's not Gale Wings. Dustwing. This thing is terrible, right? Lunala is just better, so if Lunala is in D tier, this thing has to be D tier. Alright, now we have Koraidon. I think Koraidon's S tier. I think this Pokemon is insane. It's the best Sunsetter that there is. People are saying Groudon, but that's just because they've used Groudon a million times. This thing is not weak to Flutter Mane. I mean, it is weak to Flutter Mane. Hold on, let me... This thing is not weak to Kyogre, which is a huge advantage to it. But it is weak to the other two that are up here. But I mean, he's weak to this, right? But also it's weak to Fluttermane, so it does have a lot of common weaknesses, but it can terrestrialize fire, which is going to be huge, because then that's going to give its Flare Blitz a huge boost, especially with its ability. The Flare Blitz are going to be doing massive amounts of damage. You could put Assault Vest on this thing, or you can put something like that Clear Amulet to help deal with those Incineroars that are going to try to intimidate you. This thing has a huge attack stat. It is just as fast as Fluttermane, and it's super bulky. It pairs very well with a sleep user, as well as things like the Walking Wake. So this is going to be a very, very good Pokemon, as long as you have a way to deal with that Fluttermane. Once again, going Terra Fire is going to be a huge way to deal with it. And if you are running that Assault Vest, don't trust me, do the calc. The Shadow Ball does nothing. So even in the sun, it just doesn't do anything. So this Pokemon's going to be really good. Gets paired very well with Fluttermane 2, which is a Fluttermane counter, of course. So I think this Pokemon is S tier. If not, it is going to be the highest of A tiers. But I'm going to put it at S tier because I am a believer. All right, we got Origin Form. I mean, just put it next to it. Don't use this thing. All right, Palkia. I think Palkia is an A tier. I think we're going to see a lot of these bulk teams that we're seeing already, Porygon with Ting Lu. They could add something like Palkia to get a lot more damage out of the team, as well as cover some of the weaknesses that they're already dealing with. This thing's typing is insane. Water and Dragon is really good. Walking Wake has that same pairing, but is weaker than Palkia, and of course not as bulky. So we could see Palkia really taking advantage of that and just being super successful. Next we have Reshiram. I think Reshiram is top of C tier probably. It is pretty decent. It's not bad. I think Kyurem White is better because it just has more stats. But I think Kyurem White, which has had success in the past, not tons and tons, but it has had success, is pretty decent. And fire typing is going to be pretty good. So yeah, I think it's not bad. All right, next we have Solgaleo. I think Solgaleo is probably bottom of B tier. I think it could still be really good. It can't be intimidated, which is really nice. It's really good with weakness policy. It's pretty fast. It can also do Trick Room stuff if you really want to. It has a really good attack. So I think it's a pretty decent Pokemon. I don't think it'll be as good as it was in Sword and Shield, but I think people will still use it and find success with it. It pairs well with a lot of Pokemon that are in the meta right now, so you can take advantage of that. Next, we have Zekrom, and actually last but not least, because none of these Pokemon are actually in the game. If they were, this would look like this, and this would look like this. But we have Zekrom, and I think Zekrom is pretty bad. It's always been pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Use Miraidon, right? Miraidon is just better Zekrom. Zekrom could be intimidated. Miraidon can't. You know, the game over. GG. Like, you're setting up the electric train that's going to boost your electric move. Zekrom is just clicking an electric move that's okay. So it's just bad. Use Miraidon. Even if you don't like Miraidon's design, you're just nerfing yourself by using Zekrom. So yeah, that's kind of my tier list, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm definitely going to be building some teams coming up in the next couple of days. We might do some on stream, play some casual and stuff like that. So if you want to come by, my link will be down in the description. Yeah, come and hang out, share your ideas. Let me know what your guys' ranking. Which restrictor are you most excited to use in Regulation G? For me personally, it's gotta be it's probably Koraidon. I was gonna say it's gotta be Koraidon, but it's probably Koraidon. But I don't know. I kind of want to build Lugia, even though it's so trash. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see which one I go with. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. And if you did and you're not subscribed, make sure you do so. If you liked the video, make sure you thumbs it up. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.